Hello and welcome to HomeTech. HomeTech is a podcast dedicated to discovering new and emerging technologies for the home. We discuss news about the Internet of Things, home automation, and more. I'm Seth Johnson in Florida, and I'm joined by Jason Griffin in Los Angeles.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of HomeTech. Seth, how are you?
Doing well, Jason. How's it going?
Going great. Ready to sit down and record another great podcast here. Had some interesting news stories that we're going to touch on, and then also we're going to do one of our episodes today where we talk a little bit, about our background as professional integrators, and we're going to talk about the sales process and kind of how that process would work for, say, a consumer who's in the market and looking to buy a professionally installed home automation or home technology system. We're going to touch on some of the things that they can expect to go through in that process, maybe some of the questions and that they can or that they should be asking and kind of running through that process. So I look forward to that conversation.
Yeah, I think that we kind of have an outline of kind of what we want to talk about, and I think you and I have probably seen the same things over the years when it comes to sales. Both from the customer's perspective and from the integrator's perspective. I think it's going to be a good conversation.
Yep, I agree. Look forward to getting into it. But before we dive into that, just some housekeeping that I wanted to touch on. We have just a correction, a minor correction from last week when we were talking about the DropCam acquisition, and we left off a 5 in the figure of what they were acquired for. So it was $555 million, and we said it was $55 million. Substantial difference.
It's close. Close enough.
Still a fraction of what Nest was acquired for, which was kind of the context of what we were talking about there. But Richard Gunther, actually from Home On, which is another home automation podcast that I would encourage fans of our show to check out, was kind enough to point that out. And so we wanted to correct that. And also, again, just remind people to come by the website, HomeTech.fm. For show notes on this episode, just add a /shows/22 to the end of that. And drop by, leave us a comment, let us know how we're doing, make a suggestion. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. It's really encouraging, all the feedback we're getting, each week. I really like reading the emails that come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously also on Twitter, if people are listening and aren't following us over there, just find us at Home Tech Podcast. And also just do a search for HomeTech.fm on Facebook and give us a like over there. We would definitely appreciate it. And the last thing I wanted to mention is we are also listed on a really cool website. Guy by the name of Michael Wolf, who a lot of our listeners probably have already heard of, runs a site called technology.fm. And we're kind of flanked over there by a number of other really great technology-related podcasts. And we're proud to be a part of that site and would encourage fans of our show to go over there and check it out.
Yeah, definitely. I really like some of his podcasts, specifically Next Market, which doesn't cover the home technology, but he does just a wide variety of interviews. It's just enjoyable for me, enjoyable to listen to. You get a different perspective on different things. So.
Yeah, the Next Market podcast is great. Like you said, not directly related to technology, although it does venture into that area from time to time. And he's also got the Smart Home Show, which is a really great show as well.
Definitely. We should do a podcast roundup one of these days. What's in our podcast feeds?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
All right. Well, a couple things happened this week. Some interesting news from a company called Launchport. Well, I guess it's not Launchport. Is it iDock?
It's actually iPort.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and iPort is owned by Dana Innovations, and Dana Innovations also owns Sonance, is a speaker manufacturer, and TrueFig, who makes, for people who aren't familiar with it, really sort of custom, nice flush finishing wall plates for light switches,
high-end
outlets, all that. Yeah, they're very high-end, very pricey. I'm actually doing a big project right now where it's TrueFig throughout the house, and it's quite a process getting those put in and getting them to flush out correctly, but they really do finish out beautifully.
Yeah, I can't remember how. I mean, if we're just talking about like a wall outlet where you would plug in your TV, I remember the cost on those were like in the hundreds of dollars each. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure even if you're including labor in that either.
No, just for the part.
Because the labor is really intensive on those, and they are not for the faint of heart.
If you got the money,
yeah,
why not?
Exactly. They're geared for a very high end of the market, and homes that the goal of the designer and the architect in building the home is to have it ready to shoot for a magazine and have it be of that caliber, and that's what that product is all about. But we digress. So iPort is the name of the company, and LaunchPort is one of their products. And if people aren't familiar with LaunchPort, it's a really cool. It comes in two parts. Basically, you've got what the company and dealers typically refer to as the puck, and you've got a sleeve that goes around your iPad. And they make them in different sizes for the iPad mini and different models of the iPads. And you slide that sleeve on the iPad, and then you dock it on this puck, and it makes a real strong magnetic connection. And so it's easy to take on and off, so you get the portability of the iPad, but you also have the convenience of having a dock that charges it through this patented inductive charging process that they have.
Yeah, and this newer product they have has hard buttons down the side, and it looks awesome. Like this is what I wanted on an iPad for control for so long.
It's really cool, and I actually spent some time looking at the website last night, which just went live, and just coincidentally, I co-host another podcast that I don't think I've ever even mentioned on the show, but it's called AV Shop Talk. And integrators who listen to our show might be interested in checking that one out. It's more of a for pros, by pros type of show. And we interviewed Derek Dahl actually just yesterday, the day before we're recording here. And Derek Dahl is the product manager for iPort. And so he was telling us a little about this product. Sounds really cool. Definitely solves a problem. Like one of the big arguments, conversations that always goes back and forth when you talk about traditional purpose-built touch panels, such as like Crestron or AMX, for example, is that they have the ability on those to give you the tactile feel and the always-on nature of true push buttons. And iPads have never had that. So when you're using an iPad as a home automation controller, that can be a big deal. And I think LaunchPort has really solved a problem with this. And I know for one that I will be speccing it, and I actually can't wait to get it into a house and try it out.
Yeah, I was like, I got a couple of boardroom projects this would be perfect for. But I mean, it looks amazing. I mean, it's a great idea, and it's always on. So the iPad doesn't even have to be on for this thing to work. If you have a volume button or a power on and off button on it, you can press the button on the side, and it works independently from the iPad internals. It goes out to a Lutron processor and communicates with a third-party control system. That's really killer. I mean, you don't have to wake up the iPad, launch an app, and get the iPad spun up and talking over Wi-Fi to a control processor. Mm-hmm. There's no latency there. That's killer.
Yeah, and that was one of the very first questions that I asked Derek, and that episode hasn't gone live, but at some point I'll throw a link out there on our Twitter account to it. I said, well, how do these hard buttons work? How do they communicate with the automation systems? Because obviously they're not going to put out a product that doesn't integrate with the major control systems like Savant, Crestron, Control 4. iPort really wouldn't do that because the residential integration market is their bread and butter. And when he came back and said that they're using the Lutron Clear Connect protocol for that communication, it struck me as really smart and an obvious choice, right? Because essentially home automation systems can all already integrate very easily with Lutron. All of that intelligence and drivers and everything it's all out there. It's all been done. It's a very straightforward thing for us to do, relatively, right, in the grand scheme of things. And so a home automation system like Savant really doesn't have to know the difference between this and like a Lutron keypad, for instance. And that's what makes it really appealing to me, is that it's not some new protocol or additional hub or driver that you have to put in your control system and hope that it works. It's just Lutron, and we've been integrating with Lutron for years.
Right, and it's probably already something that is in the house or going into the project anyway. I mean, if you're doing an install with a custom integrator, if you're doing a larger system, you're using the HomeWorks QS, which will be your centralized panel system, or you're using the RAW2 system, which is their wireless version, and this works directly with those two systems.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's smart.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there, but also with the relatively new Smart Bridge Pro, it does work with that as well. So they're kind of hitting all the segments of the market there, and it looks like a very approachable product.
That's for their Casetta line, right? It's like their own shading and lighting control system.
Yeah, it's their, I don't want to use the term low end, but it's their kind of entry level hub that's really targeted. Lutron is making a push at the straight to consumer market. They've traditionally always been, well, not always, but they've traditionally been a company that people think of and associate with the dealer channel and the dealer installed channel. They've had some products out there like basic light switches and things like that obviously that doesn't apply to, but it's kind of a tangent, but they are making a push into that straight to consumer market, and the Smart Bridge Pro is kind of the embodiment of that.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, they've always had a consumer presence in some form or fashion. What I thought was really interesting is that you don't actually have to have any of those bridges. Like if you just got the sleeve and the station to charge it with and the iPad, you could actually pair those buttons with an individual dimmer. I think the Casetta dimmers, I was looking through some of the documentation on the website, and you can just communicate directly with devices without having the hub in between. So that's kind of a cool, pretty low-end option.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I guess anything that you could integrate with a Pico remote without the need for a hub. I think the GE intelligent lights integrate directly with Pico.
Oh, that's right.
And so you could theoretically do that as well. In theory, right? You'd have to kind of play around with that to see how well it works. But I think from a usability standpoint, this is a very big deal. They're the first company doing this. There's no real alternative to the LaunchPort product out on the market. They're really the only one doing it. It's a super cool product. We sell a ton of it and love it. And if there are people out there who aren't familiar with it, should definitely go check it out.
No, definitely, and it's not a cheap feeling product. Like if you ever hold one in your hand or see one, you're impressed.
Yeah,
it feels right. It goes right along with the iPad. It actually makes the iPad a little bit easier to hold in some cases, and the charging station, like you said, is that induction just kind of magnetically sticks on. And you don't have to plug a cord or anything into it. So it's pretty
really
cool.
slick.
All right, so it looks like another company that we've been using for a couple of years here, Ubiquiti, is getting kind of into smart in-wall devices.
Yeah, I saw that, and we've talked about Ubiquiti before. They make networking hardware. I know you guys in your firm use them, the Unify Wi-Fi system on all your jobs, correct? Well, maybe not all, but
it's turning into all. It's slowly turning into all because they're just so easy to deploy.
Mm-hmm. And we've talked about that on previous episodes, and they've always had this. I don't know. I think they call it MFi. It's spelled MFI, but there can be confusion there because of the recent HomeKit announcement and the Made for iPhone program. But in this case, MFi or MFI doesn't stand for that. It's their own thing they've had going for a while. But traditionally, it's kind of been geared towards like commercial applications. So maybe monitoring your server room, keeping an eye on that, giving you remote reboot capabilities if something locks up. So plugs that connect to the Wi-Fi that can be controlled from the Unify or Ubiquiti software, I should say. So it was more of a traditional like M2M application, but they just recently announced their first in-wall devices that go into a single gang ring. So they have a new smart plug, and it looks like a smart dimmer that they're making now.
Yeah, it's interesting technology. I still kind of feel like this is still geared towards commercial, but you possibly could use it in your house if you wanted. But it still has that commercial feel. Like it's made for a server room or an office. I noticed one thing: it's only available in black right now.
Yeah,
like you only have one color and it's black. That okay?
Right.
Like I can't.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think it's really geared towards home automation, but it is interesting because it makes you wonder, like, are they keeping an eye on it? Do they have plans to move into that space? I kind of doubt it. They're a pretty hardcore just networking company. I think, do pretty well. I know a lot of people who use them. But interesting product, just another smart dimmer, smart plug out there on the market.
Well, and I think what's most interesting to me is the way that the in-wall switch works. When you install it, it installs as a switch, and you can go into the configuration and change it over to be a dimmer.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's like a dual device, and that makes install pretty easy, because a lot of times when you're installing these devices, you don't know if it's the load that you're going to be connecting the device, the integrated device to, is going to be a dimmable load. So going in as like a default as a switch, and then being able to go into the little web configuration utility and change it over to dimmer later on, I think that's pretty cool. I wish I had something like that for Control 4 or Lutron or anything. I mean, it's all one device, one SKU.
Yeah. That would be a really nice product for Lutron, like Radio Raw 2 or Control 4 to put out as well. It would just kind of, because a lot of times, like you said, you don't really know if the load that you're connecting to is dimmable. That really only became a problem with the advent of LED lighting. With incandescents, it's not an issue. But yeah, when you're designing, especially large or even medium size, panel-based or switch-based lighting control systems, it's a huge issue. Like understanding which loads are going where and which ones are dimmable and which ones aren't can be a real pain. So the fact that they actually came out with this switch/dimmer combo all in one is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe some other companies will follow suit there. Who knows?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, one SKU. That's all I asked for.
One SKU. It's the dream.
Exactly.
Well, in other news, RTI, which is a very popular maker of programmable kind of universal remotes, has announced two-way IP control of Apple TV. And it looks like they're the first ones. I mean, they're the first ones that I know of that are doing this. Do you know of anyone else who's doing this?
Well, I know that you can integrate with Apple TVs using a computer setup. You can kind of control iTunes on a computer set up on the network that's running iTunes all the time, and it talks to an Apple TV. But this one gets in the middle and communicates directly with the Apple TV and gets metadata feedback directly from the Apple TV, which is big and different. It hasn't been done since the Generation 1. It used to, there was a kind of an API that you could talk to, but it's been encrypted for a while, and it looks like somebody's figured out how to do it. And his name's Matt Crump, and he's an Australia-based integrator, I guess. Created an integration for RTI, and he says that he'll be coming out with some integrations for other systems later on. So that's pretty cool. It is a hack. So, I mean, he kind of goes into detail how he hacked it. But he says he's not really worried that they're going to change anything because there's so many devices out there that run it. And I guess he's probably right at this point.
Yeah, I would think so. It's probably a safe bet. But with anything like that's been hacked or backdoored, you're just not guaranteed anything. And as an integrator who's worked with RTI products, we typically use their handheld remotes. I know they do make some touch panels. And some in-wall products as well. But, as cool as this is, it's kind of like, to me, I go, well, do I really need two-way feedback from my Apple TV? Like, the whole beauty, in my opinion, of Apple TV is just a simple on-screen user interface. And I don't mind just having the 4 buttons and looking up at the screen to do it. But, I'm sure there are use cases, maybe if you're, I guess, pulling iTunes metadata off of there and piping that into your house audio system. That might be pretty nice. I just don't know. I'm not like super jazzed about this and running out to try to implement it myself. I don't know what your take is on that.
I'm not a very big. I mean, I use Apple TV for streaming video, but I'm not a big like media server person.
Mm-hmm.
Like the XBMC and Popcorn and all that stuff. I've never really gotten into that, and I'm sad to say I'm just not a big. I'd probably like one, but I just have never had the time or patience to actually get into doing and setting up one of those things. The Apple TV just kind of solves a lot of that kind of out of the box for $100, and for me, it's kind of like, why do any more? But I know that the Plex media server and all this stuff. I know it's got some really cool features that Apple TV doesn't do. That said, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm not gonna run out and try and do it tomorrow.
Yeah, I to me, the only real thing that I think would be nice about that would possibly be the ability to monitor the power status of an Apple TV and have your automation system maybe trigger certain events based on it. So, I've implemented Apple TVs with control systems before where, for whatever reason, they just don't always kind of come out of sleep mode reliably. And maybe if there was a way to track that using two-way control and send it an extra play command if it didn't wake up on the first one, that could be nice, and it could kind of help solve some of the nagging issues where a client will call you and say, hey, my Apple TV isn't working, but really it's just asleep. That's not a big issue, and typically, if I have a problem with it, you can just set it to not go to sleep, and that's really not a big deal. But beyond that, that's sort of behind the scenes type stuff that you might be able to do with this. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it kind of feels like a solution looking for a problem.
Right. And I wonder. I mean, it's kind of rumored that Apple will be doing something with the Apple TV. I guess it's been rumored for a number of years now, but it looks closer and closer like there'll be some type of integration. Maybe later this year. I don't know. There's really been no announcements around that. I wonder if all this work was done, for naught. If there's some integration that you can do with Apple TV later on, maybe this was just a lot of work for nothing.
Yeah, it could be. But knowing the type of people that would, or the type of person I should say, that would sit down and invest the kind of time that it would take to figure this out is probably a tinkerer by nature and probably enjoyed doing it. And now he's getting a little bit of publicity for it, and hopefully it helps him out, helps his business out. I know there's a lot of dealers out there who are going to be jazzed about it and who are going to use it. To me, it's kind of like, it's kind of cool, but it doesn't really change anything for me.
Yeah, I'm on his website, mydevice.com.au, and he's got a lot of good integrations made up for RTI alongside of this. So, I mean, looks like he's pretty big into doing RTI development, which is good. I mean,
yeah. Hey, and he just got a free plug on HomeTech.
Yeah, he's going to be a millionaire now.
So, what do you think, Seth? Should we jump into our feature?
Yeah, I think we should dive right on in. Talk a little bit about the sales process, and I guess we could kind of look at it from both angles. As a consumer walking into a home theater store and asking, how do I get this process started? Or, as a dealer or integrator, kind of what is the best practice to make something make a sale seamless and easy all the way from the beginning to the end. Because I'm not sure about you, but I get that question a lot. Like, how much does something cost, or how do I do this? How do we get started? And it's kind of a big unknown. And I think mostly because there's so many different integrators out there with different levels of experience, with different backgrounds, and everybody does everything differently. And of course, no one is wrong.
Yeah.
So it's there's no one right way of doing things. But I think we can probably touch on a number of the best way of doing things, at least from our experiences over the years, and kind of shed a little light on the process of buying a either custom system or even a package type system from a dealer.
Yeah, I think just working with an integrator in general for people who haven't done it before can feel like a bit of an intimidating process. I think with other trades, it can also be intimidating. I mean, building a house in general um, is intimidating. There's a lot to it, but with systems integration and working with a professional integrator, there's just so much room for, uh, I don't know, variety in the type of integrator and type of proposal that you're going to get back. So I think going into that process, it's really important to understand a few basic things. And I think one of the things that we've touched on before, and I'll touch on again here, is just going into the process first, defining what you want in the end from your system. And your integrator, as you go into that process, should be trying to pull that out of you right from the start. And don't worry about the gear, don't worry about the brand or the technology behind it all. Just paint with broad strokes and define what that end goal is, what you're after with the technology in your home. And then, you can work backwards from there, and the integrator will figure out all of the technology that it will take to make that happen.
Right. And that's really key is really just talking about what you want to do in your house, what you want to watch on this TV, how do you want that TV mounted on the wall. I mean, all of those things need to be captured by the dealer to be able to make a correct budget, or a correct design, or a correct quote for you. And a lot of times, like you said, don't worry about getting it right either. I mean, your ideas and thoughts will change over that time. The dealer may come back to you and say, hey, I noticed we were talking about doing this, but we found that this works a little bit better. Do you want to try that? And you guys working together may have come to a completely different system, a completely different idea how things should work. Right. And that's how it should work. That's how this process should work. Yeah,
absolutely. And once you sort of define that vision and do it from a high level, there's kind of a decision, and there's I think a healthy debate amongst integrators who talk about the sales process and try to, debate the pros and cons of going into that sales process. And do we as integrators ask the client right out of the gate, what's your budget? What do you want to spend? And then kind of work based off of that number to try to figure out what can be implemented for that? Or do we start by just let's define the vision first? And this is the camp that I fall into. Like, let's define the vision first and just figure out what you're trying to do. Let me go to the drawing board, put together some numbers for you, come back, and if they're completely, sticker shock, which happens a lot, like expect some sticker shock if you're going into this process for the first time. Let the integrator explain it to you, explain all the charges, and figure out, are there things in here, if this is more than I want to spend, what can we scale back? Can we change certain areas to maybe pre-wire them only and get the infrastructure in place, and then come back and finish that room out later? Are there maybe some ancillary features to that home automation system that you can opt out of now, but again, have the infrastructure in place to integrate with later? Those kind of decisions can be made, but you've got to get a starting point. And I don't like to completely sort of put a ceiling on everything right off the bat with a budget, but some integrators will. So it just depends.
Yeah, I mean, the way I work is I try and get a good idea what the scope is, and like you said, go to the drawing board, put some educated guesses on a budget together, and kind of align those numbers with what I wrote down as being the scope of the project. So, I know that they want a surround sound in here with a 75-inch TV. Probably going to be around $10,000. I mean, maybe $12,000. Depends on how much the TV costs and how what speakers they want. They want a sound bar and that kind of thing. So, I mean, after, 10, 15 years of doing this, I kind of have a good idea how much stuff costs. It could be more. It could be less. It all depends on how you want that to come out at the end. And that's really where I find it's best to have that conversation, say, do you agree with this budget? It's kind of like walking onto a car lot and saying, I'd like to buy a car, and, only saying, well, car needs to have 4 wheels and I don't care about anything else. Well,
Yeah.
You probably do. You probably care about the color. You probably care that it has an engine inside. And you know, it's one of those things. A car can range from, you know, a $250 beater all the way up to a very nice 6-figure Maserati. I mean, there's a full range, and the same thing can be said for a single room, a home theater. I've seen home theaters done for under $10,000 easily, and then I've seen them done for 10 or more times that amount easily.
Yeah, there's just so many variables, and it's a question that I get asked a lot by friends and family, or maybe just somebody I've just met. You know, what do these systems cost? Like, what does it cost to put in one of these systems? And it literally is an impossible question to answer, because even just me, the projects I'm managing right now, you know, could range anywhere from like $10,000 or $15,000 up to $1 million or more, literally. And so the answer to that question is it totally depends. It's impossible to answer that. But if you define a reasonable scope, and if you get down to at least a reasonable level of detail, you don't have to get to the nuts and bolts. Your integrator should be able to come back to you with a reasonable estimate, but don't expect them just to be able to throw out a number at that first meeting. A lot of clients do, and I really try to avoid doing that, because even though they say, "Oh, I'm not going to hold you to it," you never know, and you don't want them to be shocked when you come back and say, "Hey, you know, when I threw that number out, I kind of went back to the drawing board and I thought of this feature and that feature, and it added X amount of dollars." And you know, setting that expectation in their mind right at that first meeting and just kind of spitballing numbers is some integrators will do it, and some will do it very accurately too, I should say. Just people that have been doing sales for a really long time can estimate that pretty accurately, but I prefer not to. You know, give me a chance to digest it, go back. I'll come back to you with at least a ballpark figure, you know, within a day or two.
Right. And I think that we should note that this, you know, you and I are probably talking about the larger projects, like $15,000 and up. There are smaller projects, and granted, not every market is the same as your market and my market, where a dealer may have developed product packages, so to speak, or just an idea of a grouping of products, and kind of knows how much that's going to cost. Like, if a client came in and said, you know, I want to do whole house audio in my house, I want to listen to Pandora and Spotify, I'm going to say, hey, take a look at this Sonos system over here. It's very inexpensive. We can do it wirelessly. And I can pretty much right then on the spot tell them how much it's going to cost for how many rooms they want to have a Sonos speaker in. I mean, that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really not, I don't really think that type of system is what you and I are talking about right now. We're talking about the bigger projects where you may have a scope of time of like multiple months to multiple years.
To complete. Yeah. No, that's a great point. I'm glad you pointed that out. And even for some of the mid to even higher level integrators that are working out there are companies that are doing package-based systems. It is not an uncommon thing for these integrators to put together, you know, a pre-packaged list of equipment. They know essentially how much time it's going to take to install that, because it's the same equipment that they've been installing for however long. And it's a great way of doing things for the integrators, because it makes things relatively predictable and straightforward, and it brings the price down because they can get in and get out as efficiently as possible. So the client gets a good deal, and the integrator, you know, can get in and out and hopefully execute a good system and make a little money to put some food in the fridge, and everyone's happy.
Right. But on one of those systems, and we actually do some things like that. We have some packages set up with builder contractors, for example, for structured wiring and security. So we know exactly what goes into those. We know here's a fixed cost, give that to the builders, give that to a homeowner. We know exactly what goes into that. And it makes for an easy, quick sales process for them, and it works well. But that is a package system. On a package system, you're going to expect less customization, and I wouldn't, if you're looking for something custom, I wouldn't expect to get that from somebody that is selling you a packaged system.
Right.
It can be done. It can easily be done, but it's a lot harder to get that custom feel out of it in the end.
Yeah, and this dovetails nicely with the conversation about, is your integrator going to charge for design time? Typically, like in the past, I would say when integrators were first kind of becoming a thing in an established industry, it was pretty uncommon, I would say, pretty rare that you would have an integrator charge you for an estimate. Nowadays, that's kind of changing. And again, this is not for all jobs, but a lot of times on these higher end jobs, it's becoming more and more common because the complexity has grown so much over the years. It's becoming more and more common for integrators to charge for design, and what you're getting for that design fee, hopefully in theory, is a comprehensive set of documents that really lays out the system, builds the system on paper, detailed bill of materials, probably a floor plan, a detailed scope of work written in plain English that describes what you're getting. And those are really important things, especially if you're doing a system at a higher level. So don't be completely surprised if an integrator charges sort of a retainer. And oftentimes, like I know what we'll do is we might charge a retainer for the design, but if the client does go with us and use us for the system, we'll basically issue that retainer back as a credit towards the contract.
Right, I've seen that done. I've seen that done a number of times in my past. We charge for design on the larger systems. On the smaller ones that I can put kind of a simple package together on, we don't charge design on it. But again, it's a less customized system. They're not expecting the same documentation and that kind of thing out of it. But yeah, I think as a homeowner, if you don't get a design contract done, you should probably consider your job being as like a time and materials job. I mean, that's one way to look at it. Even though you've got it quoted on labor, you've got it quoted on equipment, it's still more of a time and materials job because it may not cover your complete scope when it's finished. It might, but it's going to be a lot harder for that to come out that way. Like you said, doing the bespoke design, that's going to cover everything, cross all the T's, dot all the I's for not only the integrator, but the customer as well. Because with that document set, the customer can go to any integrator in town and say, hey, how much would you charge for this system? Mm-hmm. And you're basically issuing a bill of materials at that point with your labor rate on it. I've done that a number of times where somebody came to me with a completely different design, and I put all my numbers into it and handed them a quote, and let's see if we get the job. It's that's once that engineering's done, you don't have anything to worry about. The job should be done to the letter of that contract.
Yeah, and that's actually even becoming a common practice, almost a separate business model. Is sort of a home automation, home technology consultant role where you're buying that design and engineering as a complete separate deal, completely independent of the installation company or the products that are going to get installed. And the argument for that, and I think it makes perfect sense, especially at the high end of the market, is that when you start getting into new builds, custom builds, and you go out and I know builders and architects, this drives them crazy about working with integrators, is that their client comes in, says they want a home technology system. They go out and they shop it around to their 3 or 4 integrators in town that they typically work with. And those 3 bids come back in, and you get one that's for $50,000, another that's for $80,000, and another that's for $130,000.
Or $5,000.
Yeah, yeah. Or $500,000. Geez, you just don't know. And it's virtually impossible for anyone who hasn't worked in this industry for at least a number of years to really put 3 different bids generated by 3 different companies side by side and truly understand what makes bid A different from B, different from C. And for builders and architects to try to do that when they've got so many other things that they're trying to sort out, it's just maddening. So the argument for paying for design separately, it pays dividends there, because what you do is you work with an integrator who in theory at least, can give you a completely unbiased assessment of what your needs actually are, because they're not necessarily selling you the equipment, although most of them who also sell equipment obviously are hoping to. But the idea is at least that you'll get a relatively unbiased assessment of your needs and a detailed list of documents that lay that out, leaves a lot less room for interpretation. And then you own that documentation. You can go out and you shop it around to different integrators, and that way you're getting an apples to apples price, which without that documentation is exceedingly difficult.
Right. And take a step back. If you're a homeowner, you're probably doing this with your home anyway. You have an architect design it, and then you shop it, that design with different builders to get, find out which builder you like and which one has the right finishes and pricing that you want. I mean, it's the same idea. Now, at the same time, you could go to a builder who does all of that in-house, and you have a model home, and you get that model home built with certain things inside of it, and that's the package system. So it works either way. But if you want the truly custom home, you're going to pay an architect truly custom prices to design that home.
And if you think about it, the same thing happens with electrical. Like, the architects typically work with an electrical engineer who's a dedicated engineer. He's not an electrician in the sense of somebody who's going to come out and pull the wire and install the plugs and the light fixtures in your house. He's an engineer. That's all he does, is he makes sure that the house is properly wired, sticks to code, all of that sort of thing. And then he puts out a spec, basically, that goes out to electricians who are then bidding apples to apples. But one of the big challenges with systems integration, and I think it's just because it's a relatively new industry, is that doesn't exist. There's no real division right now between the engineering and the selling / installing of systems. And I think that's changing, and I think it's changing for good reason.
Yeah, and they do that for mechanical and plumbing as well. They send it off to an engineer, and they get that designed into the house to make sure your HVAC system has enough, CFM throughout the house to actually cool and reduce the heat. I fully expect that, and I'm actually seeing this now on some of the higher end builders that we have. They're using a third-party lighting design firm where you'll get a lighting design come back to you with basically, here are all the keypad locations, here are all the fixtures, plug in your lighting control numbers, and hand it on over. And, that works really well, because I don't have to spend hours and hours and hours kind of doing a takeoff and figuring out a lighting system. I can just look at the numbers right here and say, well, this is how much this costs, and here's how much we're going to cost to put it in. I like that, so...
Yeah, exactly. It makes things easier and leaves less room for interpretation and speeds up the whole process. And I think it's a win-win all the way around. So we've really kind of covered the design and engineering portion of it. I think that, I don't know, unless you have anything you wanted to add to that portion of it, I think we should kind of jump into, like, the contract is signed, now what?
Well, I do have one thing to add. If you go and talk to an integrator, and the next conversation you have is an integrator handing you a line item quote, that is not a design system. That's not what you want.
Yes, that's a good point.
You don't want to have a bill of materials on the second conversation that you've had with the builder. You do want to have a conversation about budget before you get that, because the line item quotes, those are not designed systems. That's what you should get on your quote, which should be done after the design, after you know what equipment needs to go in your house from the design.
It's a bill of materials.
Exactly.
And a lot of integrators unfortunately confuse a bill of materials with like a system design. And you make a good point. It's not. So that's one of the things that you should actually be getting towards the end. And that reminds me as well to touch on the importance of a scope of work. We kind of glossed over that, but in my opinion, at least, that's one of the most important documents that you get in the entire process, because as a customer, and you're looking at an estimate with just a bunch of line items and part numbers and prices and all of that, it's really hard to make heads or tails of that unless you really know what you're doing. And the scope of work it's just simple. It's a plain English explanation that goes through room by room and describes what you're getting. And if your integrator's not providing a scope of work, you should ask them to, because that is extremely important in my opinion, and it should never ever be skipped in the sales process.
Right. You actually had a pretty good post you did for Integrators Academy, where you talked about buying an engagement ring. I kind of went through the similar process. Yeah. I mean, I know nothing about jewelry. You can ask my wife. I'm not good at jewelry. I can't actually. Well, we'll go into how badly I can pick jewelry, but I can't actually tell what is good jewelry and what's bad jewelry. It must be something bad wrong with me, but I don't understand all of the little minute details that go into this.
It's not just you. Don't worry.
Okay, good. I'm going to go ahead and tell her that after we're done recording here.
Yeah, you should.
So there's a lot that goes into buying, a ring. Like you had on there, the 4 C's, cut, clarity, all the good stuff that I don't even know. All I look at is price. So it's kind of color. Color is one of them. But yeah, it's one of those things that if you don't know all of those little tiny things that go into making that ring, it's hard to make an informed decision. And if an integrator comes back and hands you a bill of materials, there's no way you can make an informed decision because you don't know if in that price they're including cables. I mean, it's just, there's no way to do it. So it's stay away from that kind of stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. And that article that you're talking about is over on integratorsacademy.com, and we'll throw a link up to that in the show notes. But I just was struck by when I was shopping for an engagement ring, and I was kind of reflecting on the process after I had selected it. I was thinking about work and just the number of parallels there to me were striking, because as a guy, particularly just like you, who knows next to nothing about jewelry, going into that process, it's a large purchase. It's a purchase that you hopefully only want to make once, and it's something that you don't want to get wrong. So going into that process, very similar in a lot of ways to shopping for a home or
stressful
a home in general, or a home technology system. It's stressful and you don't want to get it wrong. And the gist of my article, which I hope people go check out, was that the place that I ended up buying the ring from, it wasn't based off of price. It was based a lot off of, it was a great stone and I fell in love with it, and B, just the lady who I worked with there, she just took a completely different approach to selling me, and it was really refreshing, and I was just took a lot away from that. So it's a great article. If people are interested in the sales process and hearing my take on it, would encourage them to go check that out. Definitely.
It was a pretty good read. I kind of laughed as, the same decisions that you made, I kind of had to go through too. And,
exactly.
It's like just so nervous about getting this wrong. Yeah. It's going to be wrong. And so exactly. we won't talk about rings anymore or that type of thing. But, we can go ahead and go on. The one thing I do want to mention is on your design, things will change as you're going along throughout the project. Your scope will change, especially if it's a multi-month or multi-year project. One thing you really want to do is make sure the dealer issues you a change order, even if the change order doesn't cost you any money. At least that gets documented. I've been on many, many projects where we get to the end of the projects and the gates aren't integrated. Why aren't the gates integrated? Well, somebody had a conversation with the homeowner that the gates should be on the system and you should be able to open the gates from the touchscreen. And if that was never put into documentation, it's not going to get done at the end.
Exactly.
So make sure any conversation you have that has a new idea, that you get a change order written up from the dealer, and the dealer has a price assigned for you on that, just like any other quote. They put a price tag on it.
Yeah, and honestly, especially for any system over, I would say $10,000 or $15,000, you get north of that dollar figure, expect some change orders. It's just a reality. Things change. Your needs, the things that you want to do with your technology system are going to change, and unforeseen issues are going to come up that really just part of the game. So we'd all, as integrators, we'd like to say, here's your price, you'll never see a change order. But in reality, we wouldn't be able to stay in business if we did that for everyone because of the nature of what we do and the nature of just construction in general. I mean, that goes for pretty much every trade, I would say, but probably more so when you get to trades like ours and maybe electricians that are a little bit more technical and there's more moving parts. Expect change.
I've had entire product lines disappear halfway through an install, like halfway through a project, that not only completely changed the entire equipment order, but ended up changing the entire scope of the project. Mm-hmm. So and granted, that was a multi-year project, like 2 years. We were working on a house. It went from being just a standalone, remote in every room to a full-blown video distribution system. That's one of those things that it's going to happen. And as you move through your install, just be aware that, these things can come up, especially, right now, about how our market is just kind of in flux and moving around. Things are going to come up later on that you may want to do. Make sure that, like I said, make sure it's documented, especially on the bigger projects, even on the smaller ones. It really helps. It protects both you and your dealer at the end of the project. Yeah,
absolutely. And you talked about equipment lines changing or dropping completely, and that's a drastic example, but a more subtle example might be TV models changing. If you have a project that goes on for even 2 or 3 months, TV models could change. And a lot of times integrators will have in their contract, a stipulation that exact part numbers can be swapped or subbed out as long as the functionality is the same. It feels like a gray area, and it makes people a little bit nervous, but it should be something that you keep an eye on as a customer, but understand that at the end of the project, there's going to be a slight deviation. I would say less, probably on most jobs, 5% maybe of the equipment is a different model number than what you paid for. So we're not talking about a drastic amount, but it will happen.
Yeah. The TVs, I generally put TVs and allowance off to the side because I know for the next 2 years, they're going to come down in price. And then the TV that I wanted doesn't exist anymore. At the last minute, we go out and we go to the store, we buy all the TVs we need and bring them to the job site.
Yeah, and we do the same thing. I think that's becoming a lot more common is utilizing allowances for items like that, not specifying a particular model number, but just saying, 50-inch TV, we'll budget whatever it is, hop on Best Buy and look at the pricing at the time. Honestly, TVs are one of those things integrators just aren't, we don't make any money off of them. We provide them as a convenience. So that's one of those items we prefer to just treat it with an allowance. And then when we get closer to the finish time, let's revisit this. Here's what we've got in the budget. Here's what's on the market. And then we'll issue a change order for the difference. And it could be more or it could be less.
Yeah, with one caveat. Of course, there's always one caveat, but this is kind of a big one. If you're designing furniture, cabinetry, or like maybe a customized speaker bar to go onto a specific model of TV. Yeah. Or, motorized lifts. Good one. You definitely you'll probably end up purchasing those TVs well before the jobs, and they'll just sit in a warehouse until the job's ready because the system will be designed around that specific dimension. That's really the only thing that you kind of need to watch out for.
Yep, definitely. So we've talked about the install. I think there are some important points about the completion of the job as well, because actually in our industry, completion can be a moving target, unfortunately. There are just so many moving parts, and we've talked about it before. When you move into your home, the integrator is almost guaranteed going to be the last trade there. He'll be the last contractor on your job site. You'll probably have him over for dinner a few times, uninvited. He'll be sweating in the AV rack trying to figure out why product X or Y isn't working.
Many times.
Yeah, and that's, again, just part of the game. But it's going to come to a point where the system, the original scope of the system is still complete, but oftentimes you'll have a couple items that are sort of sitting in a gray area that they weren't really part of the original scope, but they're not necessarily something the integrator is charging you for on a sales order. They're sort of doing it to put a bow on the system and make you happy. And during that completion phase, there needs to be very open communication about your punch list. It's important to put a list together, keep a notepad around, make sure you're documenting issues as you find them so that you can remember exactly what was going on with the system and report it accurately to the integrator. But don't be surprised if they're hanging around for longer than you anticipated, and they're still going to be billing for that final payment before you might think everything is done. Because really, these systems are living, breathing systems that require continuous maintenance. So I often tell people, well, our system's never really done. It just our scope of work is done.
Right.
The system is living and breathing, and we'll still be here. But here's our contract. Here's the scope of work. Everything here is done.
Exactly. Just make sure you go over that. Make sure everything that you paid for is installed and all that stuff. I mean, it's not hard to do. It's just one of those things you kind of have to do, I guess, with every project that comes to the house. Is you get what you paid for. And like you said, I always tell people if they run into a problem, write it down. Just grab a paper, write it down, stick it somewhere. So when I come back to work on something, I know exactly what you were doing, when it happened. Because a lot of times I go into a house and, this button doesn't work. I go and press the button, it works, But it may have been some edge case. The button doesn't work when the TV's on. Believe it or not, that's happened. Mm-hmm. I was watching TV, I pressed this button, I expect this to happen, and it didn't happen. I can go back and replicate that exact thing. So just if you're doing something, write it down. Write down what you're doing, what was going on, and what you expected to happen. And that can go, into your punch list. It's like you said, it's communication and just documenting everything.
Yeah, and one of the things that we should touch on here as well that ties back to the very beginning of the project is asking your integrator what kind of warranty they provide on the parts and as well as on their workmanship. And oftentimes it'll be a type of thing where maybe for 90 days after like an agreed date, right, of completion, like a sign off of completion for 90 days. If you have a defect in equipment, a manufacturer defect, the integrator will come out, swap that piece of gear out at no charge. After 90 days, integrators will charge for their time because they're not going to warrant. Beyond that point, they can't really warranty every possible issue that can come up with a manufacturer's piece of equipment. So a lot of times you'll get a smaller time period for defective equipment, and then you'll get maybe a 1 year warranty on workmanship or something of that nature.
Right, and I would schedule that follow-up visit anyway. One thing I think that we do follow-up visits on that are at least 60 days out is with lighting control. So we go through, we engrave all the keypads, and we say, okay, live with this for 60 days. Write down what you don't like, write down what you do like. We'll come back and make the changes. If you want this button right here to do a specific thing, let me know. And we'll go back and we'll re-engrave those buttons and make it just right. There's a lot of lifestyle things that just kind of pop up with these systems that, as a dealer and an integrator, I have no idea. I don't live in the house, so I don't know how this is going to work for you as a customer. Just, again, one of those things, write it down, and when we come back in 60 days, we'll take care of it for you.
Yeah, and you talked about follow-up visits, and that reminds me of service contracts or service agreements. And this is a relatively new concept in our industry. It's been happening forever in industries like IT, is the idea that we've talked about it before. These are complex systems. Things are going to break. Things are going to fail. A lot of times it's going to happen at a really inopportune time, like right before a dinner party. And you need some assurance that your integrator is going to be there for you when that happens. Now, as integrators, as reputable integrators at least, they should be there for you no matter what. But what you have to realize is that a lot of times these issues, they're not just popping up at your job, but they're popping up at 5 or 6 other jobs, or 10 or 12, depending on the size of that integrator and how many deployed systems they have. And sometimes you're going to go in a queue, and you may have to wait a day or 2 or 3 for somebody to get out there and fix it. And what is happening a lot of times now, because the systems have gotten so complex, is there are more issues now than there used to be. And in order to remain viable and to be able to afford to provide a high level of service, a lot of integrators are now offering service contracts, which is basically a monthly or yearly renewable contract. And what that will include varies a lot from integrator to integrator, but usually it'll have something like a scheduled, maybe every 30 or 60 or 90 days, they come by, do a full sweep of the system, blow the dust off all the gear, make sure everything is working, answer any questions you have, maybe update firmware, things like that could just really help a system over the long term run a lot smoother. And then in addition to that, you'll typically get like some sort of guarantee that get prioritized service over people who aren't signed up for that plan, or maybe they'll give you a lesser service rate. Instead of 85 an hour, maybe you'll pay 70 or whatever it is. So there's a lot of different ways that integrators are structuring that, but it is becoming more and more common.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that happen. That pop up from time to time, especially on the bigger jobs. Which, I mean, you're probably in more of those than I am, but on the bigger ones, they're asking for it these days. At least the contractors and architects are.
Yeah, no, and I'll be honest. I mean, we don't implement this, in my opinion, as much as we should. But yes, on the larger ones, it is more common. But it's just, I think it's making its way down market because people are able to. We talk about the DIY stuff that's coming on the market all the time now, and all of this crazy affordable home automation hardware that's available now. And some people might be interested in just going out and sort of doing it themselves, and maybe having an integrator come in and do some pre-wire infrastructure and cut in some speakers, and then maybe just pay them a retainer for the year so that when things go wrong or they can't get their app to work or whatever it is, they get a guy who can come over and help them with that. And, I don't know if that's going to be a viable business model on its own, but the way the market is shifting right now, I think it's inevitable that more and more integrators are going to start charging for their service on a more like regular and recurring basis.
Right. No, it makes sense. There's definitely some, like you said, with the new extremely affordable DIY systems out there, there's definitely going to have to be some changes in the integrators' business models. And service contracts seems kind of like one of those natural things that could come out of it. Because honestly, I'm probably at those types of homes. I'm at those systems anyway, like 2-3 times a year. I may as well just kind of put that into some kind of package and bundle up with service guarantees and everything anyway. When something happens, guaranteeing that you'll be there within X amount of hours and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And granted, I mean, right now, this is changing, but right now, most of the people that are buying this home automation, these hubs and everything, are DIY and tinkerers and people who aren't going to want to pay for somebody to come do it because they enjoy doing it. That's why they're buying it. They like playing around with that stuff. But as the technology propagates into more and more homes, I think you'll see that sort of business model start to emerge.
Yep. Well, I think it was a pretty good topic. I think we talked about how much a system could cost, and it could actually have an ongoing cost if you have a service plan or some kind of a monthly or yearly maintenance agreement signed up for. So it looks like I think we've been pretty complete in this discussion. Yeah, definitely.
To those listening, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you took a little away from it. And if you did, stop by HomeTech.fm, leave us a comment, let us know how we're doing. Also, if you're enjoying the show, of course, we'd encourage you to go over to iTunes, leave us some 5 stars reviews over there. We would really appreciate that. Or come say hi on Twitter. We've also got a relatively new thing that we're doing called SpeakPipe, and that actually is a pretty cool deal where people can go to speakpipe.com/HomeTech.fm, and you can leave us over there up to a 90-second voicemail that we'll play on a future podcast. So you can ask a question, leave a comment, just leave us some feedback, and we would love to hear from you.
Definitely. And we've got one more thing we're going to start up doing. We'll announce it a little bit earlier in our show next time, rather than at the end. But if you've got an install that you're particularly proud of as an integrator, or you're a homeowner and your integrator has done a really good job, just get in touch with us and send us a picture by Twitter. We'd really like to see if we could feature some of these installs on our homepage and kind of make a big gallery out of it, so people, when they come to HomeTech.fm, they can kind of see what a integrated home looks like. Kind of taking a chapter out of the hashtag live install group. But if you follow them on Twitter, you get all these amazing install shots. I think we would just like to kind of feature some really nice installs on our website as well. And of course, give you attributes if you'd like, or just keep it completely anonymous if you'd like.
Yeah. Yep. Love it. All right. Well, I think that's all I had, Seth. So good show, and I will talk to you again soon.
Yep. Have a good one, Jason.
Take care.